Martha's trembling voice cut through the anniversary party's laughter. "I have a confession," she whispered, eyes locked on Henry. 50 years ago, one night changed everything. The room froze, their love story unraveling before a stunned family. The community hall in Willow Creek, Ohio, glowed under strings of warm fairy lights. Tables were draped in white linen heavy with platters of sandwiches, homemade cookies, and a towering anniversary cake frosted in pale yellow. Photos lined the walls, each frame a snapshot of a life built over decades. A young Henry and Martha beaming on their wedding day in 1960. Their faces lit with hope, the blurry joy of their first child's birth. Vacations by Lake Erie, with their kids David and Emma splashing in the water. Laughter bounced off the walls, mingling with the clink of wine glasses and the chatter of family and friends. Grandkids darted between tables, giggling as they chased each other in a game of tag. The air buzzed with life, a celebration of Henry and Martha Thompson's 65th wedding anniversary. Sarah Thompson, their 30-year-old granddaughter, stood at the front of the room, her dark hair pulled into a loose bun, her smile wide as she tapped a spoon against her glass. "All right, everyone, settle down for a sec," she called, her voice bright and confident. "We're here to celebrate two of the best people I know. Grandma and Grandpa, 65 years together. Can we get a round of applause for that?" The room erupted in cheers. Henry, 85, with a shock of white hair and a slight stoop, sat beside Martha, who at 83 still had a spark in her blue eyes. They held hands under the table, their fingers intertwined like they'd been for decades. Henry gave Martha a small smile, the kind that said he'd do it all over again. Martha squeezed his hand back, her face glowing with a mix of pride and gratitude. Sarah gestured to a projector screen behind her. "I put together a little something to honor these two lovebirds," she said, winking. "Let's take a walk down memory lane." The lights dimmed, and a video began to play. Black and white photos faded into color images. Henry, in a sharp suit, twirling Martha at a dance in the 60s. The couple laughing with young David and Emma at a 4th of July picnic. A recent shot of them on their porch swing, watching the sunset. The room filled with soft ahs and chuckles as the images rolled by. Little Lily, Sarah's 8-year-old niece, squealed with delight when she spotted herself in a photo hugging her great-grandparents. David Thompson, 55, and a lawyer with a salt and pepper beard, stood up next, his glass raised high. His voice boomed warm and steady. "To Mom and Dad," he said, 65 years of love, laughter, and weathering every storm life threw at you. You're an inspiration to us all. Here's to you." Glasses clinked, and a chorus of cheers echoed through the room. "To Henry and Martha," someone shouted. Henry raised his glass, his eyes crinkling with a smile. Martha leaned into him, her laughter soft but bright. For a moment, everything was perfect, the kind of moment you'd bottle up and keep forever. Then Martha stood, her movements slow but deliberate. The room quieted, sensing something shift. Her hands trembled slightly as she smoothed her cardigan. "There's something I need to tell you all," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The chatter faded, replaced by the faint hum of the projector. Henry looked up, his brow furrowing. David froze his glass halfway to his lips. Sarah tilted her head, confused. Martha took a deep breath, her eyes glistening. 50 years ago, I made a mistake," she said. "A one-night stand." The words hit like a thunderclap. Forks clattered to plates. A gasp rippled through the room. Henry's face drained of color, his hand slipping from Martha's. David's jaw tightened, his eyes darting to his kids, who looked bewildered. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. The slideshow flickered on a photo of Henry and Martha, laughing in their 30s, frozen in a happiness that now felt like a lie. Martha's voice wavered, but she pressed on. "It was a moment of weakness, and I've carried the guilt ever since. I never meant to hurt anyone, especially you, Henry." The room was deathly silent. The clinking glasses, the laughter, the warmth, it all vanished, replaced by a suffocating weight. Henry stared at Martha, his eyes a storm of shock and betrayal. His hand moved to his chest, as if to steady his heart. David scanned the room, his face pale, his gaze landing on his daughter Sarah, who shook her head in disbelief. "I'm so sorry," Martha whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I just couldn't keep it inside anymore." No one spoke. Guests began to slip out, their faces etched with discomfort. The half-eaten cake sat abandoned on the table. Sarah moved to her grandmother's side, placing a hand on her shoulder, but her expression was conflicted, torn between love and anger. Henry stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Without a word, he walked out the back door, heading toward the small converted shed in the backyard, where he often tinkered with old radios. Martha sank into her chair, her sobs quiet but piercing. Sarah knelt beside her, whispering, "Grandma." "It's okay," but her voice lacked conviction. The party was over, the joy shattered like glass. In the days that followed, the Thompson house felt like a museum of their former life. Henry stayed in the backyard, Shed sleeping on a cot, surrounded by tools and dusty electronics. Martha remained in the house, moving through the rooms like a ghost. David called daily, his voice tight with worry. "Dad, you okay?" he asked one evening over the phone. Henry's response was curt. "I just need time, David." Sarah visited, often bringing Lily to lighten the mood, but even Lily's chatter couldn't fill the void. Martha tried to explain herself to Sarah one afternoon in the kitchen, the smell of fresh coffee lingering in the air. "It was a different time, Sarah," she said, her hands wrapped around a mug. "We were drowning. Your grandpa lost his job, and we could barely afford groceries. I thought I was protecting our family." Sarah leaned against the counter, her arms crossed. "Protecting the family, Grandma? You broke Grandpa's heart. How could you keep this from him for 50 years? Martha's eyes filled with tears. "I was ashamed, Sarah. I thought if I buried it deep enough, it'd disappear. But it never did." Sarah softened, but her voice was still sharp. "You should have told him sooner. Not in front of everyone. Not like that." Martha nodded, her head bowed. "I know. I couldn't carry it anymore." Meanwhile, Henry wrestled with his own thoughts in the shed. He'd always prided himself on being the provider, the rock of the family. Martha's confession felt like a betrayal, not just of their marriage, but of everything he believed about himself. He replayed their life together, searching for signs he'd missed. Had she ever loved him the way he loved her? The question gnawed at him, eating away at the foundation of their 65 years. One rainy afternoon, while cleaning out the shed, Henry found an old shoebox tucked behind a stack of manuals. Inside were a bundle of faded letters tied with a ribbon. His heart sank as he recognized the handwriting on the envelopes addressed to Martha in a looping script. The name Colin Reynolds was scrawled in the corner. Henry hesitated, then opened the first letter. His hands shook as he read. The words painted a picture of a time he'd tried to forget, 1975, when the steel mill shut down, and he came home each day, defeated, unable to look his kids in the eye. The letters were from Colin, a local businessman who'd offered Martha a loan to keep the family afloat. At first, the tone was friendly, almost kind. But as Henry read on, the words grew colder, more demanding. Colin had promised the loan was interest-free, a lifeline for a family on the brink. But weeks later, he changed the terms, demanding repayment they couldn't afford. One letter stood out stark and cruel. "You know what I want, Martha. One night, and the debt's gone. No one needs to know." Henry's stomach churned. He read the final letter, dated a week after the others. It was short, almost clinical. "The matter is settled. Don't contact me again. Colin." Henry sat back, his breath ragged. The pieces fell into place. Martha's confession wasn't about passion or betrayal. It was about desperation, a choice made to keep their family from falling apart. He felt a rush of anger, not at Martha, but at Colin for exploiting her, and at himself for being so consumed by his own failures that he hadn't seen her struggle. He clutched the letters, his hands trembling. For the first time in weeks, he felt something other than pain, admiration for the woman who'd carried this burden alone, and guilt for not being there when she needed him most. That evening, Henry walked back to the house, the letters in his hand. Martha was in the kitchen chopping vegetables for a stew, her movements slow and mechanical. She looked up, startled, when he entered. "Henry," she said, her voice cautious. He set the letters on the counter. "I found these," he said, his voice hoarse. "Why didn't you tell me?" Martha's eyes widened, fear flickering across her face. "I couldn't, Henry," she whispered. "You were already breaking under the weight of everything. I thought I was doing what I had to for David, for Emma, for us." Henry's throat tightened. He wanted to be angry, to shout, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he saw the young Martha of 1975, her face lined with worry, as she patched David's worn-out jeans, counted pennies for groceries, prayed for a miracle. He saw the weight she'd carried, the shame she'd buried for 50 years. "I'm sorry, Henry," she said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I never wanted to hurt you." Henry took a step closer, his own eyes misting. "No, I'm sorry," he said. "I was so caught up in my own head, blaming myself for failing you. I didn't see what you were going through, what you did for us." Martha shook her head. "It wasn't right, Henry. I betrayed you." He reached for her hand, his touch hesitant at first, then firm. "You did what you thought you had to," he said. "For our kids, for our family. I don't know if I could have been that strong." Martha's breath hitched a sob, breaking free. She gripped his hand like it was a lifeline. They stood there in the quiet kitchen, the weight of 50 years between them. The letters lay on the counter, a silent testament to their shared history. Sarah arrived the next day, her expression wary as she stepped into the house. She'd been wrestling with her own feelings, torn between loyalty to her grandparents and discomfort with the moral grayness of Martha's choice. "Grandpa," she said, sitting across from them at the dining table. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened. I get why you did it, Grandma, but it's hard to wrap my head around. That guy Colin, he took advantage of you. That's not okay." Martha nodded, her eyes downcast. "I know, Sarah. I felt trapped. I didn't see another way." Sarah leaned forward, her voice softer. "I just wish you'd told someone. You didn't have to carry that alone." Henry squeezed Martha's hand. "She's right," he said. "But I wasn't there for you either. I was too busy feeling sorry for myself." Sarah looked between them, her expression softening. "You two have been through so much," she said. "Most people would have given up. But you're still here. That's got to count for something." Martha managed a small smile. "It does," she said. "It really does." That evening, Henry and Martha sat on the porch swing, the same one where they'd spent countless evenings watching fireflies dance in the summer dusk. The air was cool, the sky streaked with pink and gold. They didn't speak at first, just let the swing creak gently under their weight. "We've been through a lot, haven't we?" Martha said finally, her voice soft but steady. Henry nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "We have. But we're still here, Martha. Still together." She turned to him, her eyes searching his. "And that's what matters," she said, a tremor of emotion in her voice. He reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining like they had 1,000 times before. The question of what if lingered unspoken. What if Martha's choice had been different, driven by something other than desperation? Would they still be here, hand in hand? Maybe. Maybe not. But they'd chosen each other through every storm, every mistake, every moment of doubt. And they'd choose each other again. Weeks later, The house felt alive again, not with the frenetic energy of the anniversary party, but with a quieter warmth. Henry and Martha sat at the kitchen table eating toast and drinking coffee, the morning light streaming through the window. The silence between them was comfortable now, not heavy with unspoken words. Sarah stopped by with Lily, who bounded into the room, clutching a drawing. "Look what I made," she chirped, holding up a crayon sketch of two stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. "It's you," and Great-Grandpa Martha's eyes lit up. "Oh, Lily, it's beautiful," she said, pulling the girl into a hug. Henry grinned, ruffling Lily's hair. "You're going to have to make us a whole gallery, kiddo." Sarah watched them, a smile tugging at her lips. "You two doing okay?" she asked. Henry glanced at Martha, then back at Sarah. "We're getting there," he said, "one day at a time." As Sarah and Lily left the house, settled into a gentle quiet, Henry reached across the table, taking Martha's hand. She looked at him, her eyes crinkling with a familiar warmth. The road ahead wasn't clear. There'd be moments of doubt, maybe even pain, but they weren't facing it alone. Outside, the birds sang their morning song. The coffee pot hissed softly. And in the heart of that small Ohio town, Henry and Martha Thompson sat together, their hands clasped, their love weathered but unbroken. They didn't know what the future held, but they knew one thing for sure: they'd face it side by side, just like they always had.